Welcome to Cinema Bites.
I mean, back to where they disappeared. I need. Are we on fire?
Your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie begins at New York Airport. We see Chloe, a college student, calling her mother Irene to tell her she has arrived. She finds out that her father's birthday party was canceled because he was suddenly called into work. Since her father is a pilot, Chloe decides to wait at the airport to see him. At the same time, Cameron, a TV reporter, is approached by a Christian woman who tries to convince him to accept Christ into his life. She tells him that all the disasters he sees every day at work have explanations in the Bible. Chloe interrupts her to say that God punishing innocent people for the sins of others long ago and doing so in mysterious ways is not an excuse. The woman leaves, and Cameron thanks Chloe for helping him. Chloe explains that her mother is also overly religious. Meanwhile, Rayford, Chloe's father, takes off his wedding ring before meeting the flight attendant, Hattie. When he enters the airport, Rayford sees Chloe and rushes to hug her. But Chloe is not happy because she noticed he was flirting with the flight attendant, Hattie. She confronts him about the problems between her parents. Rayford says they got married too young and people change a lot over the years. Since Irene became obsessed with religion, it's become impossible to live with her. Chloe notices her father isn't wearing his ring and guesses he agreed to work today to be with Hattie. Rayford ignores this and gives her his car keys before leaving. Later, Chloe agrees to have coffee with Cameron, and they talk about how crazy people get when they thank God for disasters. Their conversation is interrupted when an employee brings her 2 tickets for a U2 concert in London to give to her father, who is supposed to pick them up after 2 weeks. This proves he planned this trip in advance and wasn't suddenly called in for work. Chloe feels upset, so she gives the tickets to Cameron and asks him to deliver them instead. While Cameron and Rayford are boarding the plane, Chloe goes to her father's car and finds his wedding ring. She goes home and after greeting her brother Remy, she sits down to talk with her mother. At first, the conversation is friendly, but when Chloe brings up what happened at the airport, things get tense. Irene starts preaching and Chloe gets upset and leaves. Chloe needs a distraction, so she goes to the mall with Remy. Remy is worried about their parents, but Chloe reassures him that everything will be fine and they hug. Suddenly, a flash of light occurs, and Chloe finds herself hugging Remy's clothes. He has disappeared. Around her, people find their loved ones have vanished, and panic spreads everywhere. A car without a driver crashes into the mall. Chloe looks inside and finds a dead man in the passenger seat. People start taking advantage, stealing from stores and the bags of those who disappeared. Outside, a massive traffic jam blocks the streets. On Rayford's plane, some passengers try to have a friendly conversation, but others don't want to get involved. When the plane is flying smoothly, Rayford sneaks out of the cockpit to meet Hattie in secret and shows her the tickets Cameron gave him. Suddenly, the plane starts shaking and people realize some passengers have disappeared. Panic sets in and the plane loses altitude, so Rayford rushes back to the cockpit to find his co-pilot has vanished. He immediately takes control to stabilize the plane. Cameron starts recording everything, and people lose their nerves, banging on the cockpit door and demanding to see the captain. Hattie can't calm them down, and Cameron tries to help her, but it's useless. Rayford sees this on the cameras and increases the cabin pressure, causing the oxygen masks to drop. The passengers, unable to breathe, have no choice but to return to their seats and use the masks. Afterward, Rayford tries to use the radio for help but gets no response, and his phone isn't working. Once everyone calms down, Rayford restores the cabin pressure and goes to talk to the passengers, using a firm voice to keep them in their seats. He reminds them that panic is their worst enemy right now, and they need to stay calm until they know more. Hattie notices the other flight attendant is missing and goes to the cockpit to ask Rayford to reassure her because she's falling apart. Since everyone is out of their seats anyway, Cameron starts recording again and interviews the passengers. No one saw anything strange. The disappearances happened in an instant and only the people's clothes were left. One woman panics, goes to the bathroom to sniff some drugs, returns to her seat, and says she knows none of this is real. Cameron tells her to go to sleep and notices she wrote, "Not real," on her hand. A Muslim man says they should pray, but another replies that they have different gods, so they can't all pray together. Before things escalate, Rayford Anno announces they are returning to New York. At the mall, Chloe manages to make her way through the crowd after several fights. She runs to the parking lot to continue searching for Remy, but has to flee when a small plane suddenly crashes and destroys Rayford's car. Chloe has no choice but to walk. When 2 men on motorcycles pass by, they steal her brother's bag. At that moment, an accident occurs on the bridge and a school bus falls into the river. Chloe runs to help the passengers but finds the bus empty. She quickly makes it to the city and tries to call home, but no one answers, and cars are crashing everywhere. An ambulance arrives to pick up the injured, and Chloe runs to it thinking Remy might be among the victims, but the police push her back. As Chloe continues walking in the city, the glass doors of a jewelry store suddenly explode, and a dead thief falls outside. A store employee comes out with a gun and points it at Chloe until she escapes. She quickly reaches the hospital and notices a sign that says, "The end is here." On TV, she watches the news and learns that people have disappeared all over the country and chaos and panic are spreading quickly. The hospital is packed with desperate people looking for their loved ones, and Chloe can't even get close to the entrance. She decides to go around back and breaks a glass door to sneak in, avoiding dozens of people in the hallway. She manages to reach the nursery and discovers all the newborns are gone. As she checks the rooms, a mother appears behind her and tells her that children of all ages have disappeared, not just in America but all over the world. Back to Rayford, he sees another plane flying on the same route and tries to contact the pilot, but no one responds. It turns out the other plane's pilots have also disappeared, but there are still some passengers left. Hattie runs to tell the passengers to fasten their seatbelts while Rayford begins to maneuver the plane. He starts moving his plane and knows exactly what to do, and the accident is successfully avoided. But Rayford's plane's wing still hits the other plane as it takes off. Cameron looks out the window and notices the other plane is falling and on fire. At the same time, one of the passengers, a racist and ignorant man, takes advantage of the distraction and checks the Muslim man's bag, thinking he might find the bomb that caused all this, but it's just an electric toothbrush. Another passenger says that humanity doesn't have the technology to do this, and thinks the people who disappeared were abducted by aliens. After a few minutes, the passengers call Hattie to show her there's something strange on the wing. Hattie makes Cameron take a picture and gives it to Rayford, who deduces that the wing is barely holding on because of something small. It will be difficult to land the plane. The autopilot isn't working either, and Rayford can't leave the cockpit, so he sends Cameron to check if anything is leaking from the wing. Cameron does so and confirms the plane is losing fuel. Another passenger notices this and starts to panic, and a woman breaks down, saying she wants to go back to where her son disappeared. Suddenly, the wing catches fire and the plane starts shaking, causing people to panic even more. Hattie and Cameron remind everyone they need to stay calm to avoid making things worse. Cameron then reports to Rayford, who explains there's nothing he can do except try to reach New York before the fuel runs out. Eventually, the fire goes out on its own, but because of the amount of fuel lost, they'll have to start descending earlier than expected. When Chloe returns to her neighborhood, she finds many people crying over their lost loved ones. Chloe runs home and is shocked to find it empty. Her mother's jewelry is thrown in the shower, and the phone has a voicemail that's just static. When Chloe finds Irene's Bible, she throws it angrily out the window. Then she goes to see the local pastor, who tells her this is called the Rapture, and the people who disappeared went to heaven. He says he's here because even though he spent all these years preaching, he never truly believed it. God took all the children and believers to protect them from the dark times to come. But his words only make Chloe angrier, and she yells at the pastor before leaving. On the plane, Rayford searches his co-pilot's things and finds a watch with an inscription, which is a Bible verse saying that believers in God will have eternal life. Hattie brings the other flight attendants' belongings too, and they find a notebook with notes from Bible lessons. Rayford deduces that this is the Rapture and tells Hattie that his wife knew everything from the beginning. Hattie thinks this is ridiculous, yells at him, and leaves. In the cabin, a woman explodes with anger, reveals she has a gun, and demands the others tell her the truth, thinking they were sent by her husband to take her daughter. As Cameron tries to calm her, the addicted passenger says she went to a religious school and that this event matches the description of the Rapture. So she thinks the people who disappeared went to heaven. The mother says she can't live without her daughter and considers ending her life. Cameron shares some stories about his relationship with his mother until the woman changes her mind and gives him the gun. Moments later, Rayford finally gets a response on the radio and learns that the disappearances happened all over the world. The airport is full of crashed planes and landing is impossible, so Rayford will have to land in the city. Before Rayford can object to these orders, the radio cuts out again. Since Cameron has a satellite phone because he's a reporter, Rayford asks him to call Chloe, but Cameron says he's been trying all day with no success. He shows him the sad note Chloe wrote on the ticket envelope. Rayford explains he wants to apologize to his daughter and admits it was never his wife's fault that their relationship failed. It was his. Whenever Irene talked about God, he would walk away. At the same time, Chloe is depressed and climbs to the top of a bridge. After looking at the view for a few seconds, she apologizes to her mother for how she treated her in the past and is about to jump when Cameron's call finally reaches her phone. She's able to talk to Rayford, who tells her he loves her and agrees that Irene was right. Rayford explains he's not sure if he'll find a place to land the plane, but before he can say anything else, the phone loses signal and the call ends. But knowing her father is still alive is enough for Chloe to get down and run back to the city. There, she takes an abandoned bike to move faster. At the same time, Rayford tells the passengers about their slim chances of survival and asks them to start praying as the plane begins to descend. Chloe arrives at a construction site, climbs onto a truck, and starts clearing the area, moving everything away. She tries to call Cameron, and luckily the signal returns, so she's able to tell her father she found a place for him to land. The plane's navigation system isn't working, so Cameron asks Chloe to open the compass app and give them the coordinates of her location before the call suddenly drops again. Cameron then puts the coordinates into his phone's map, which Rayford uses as a guide to fly the plane in the right direction. But it's still too dark to find the exact spot, and to make things worse, they finally run out of fuel. At that moment, Chloe is able to reconnect their calls. Rayford asks her for a big light because the truck isn't enough. There are some fuel tanks nearby, so Chloe pours gasoline over them and throws a lighter, causing a huge explosion. The flames are visible to Rayford and he starts descending in that direction. Chloe jumps back into the truck and tries to get out of the way, but she's very distracted by the fire and has an accident. At the same time, the plane hits some wires as it lands, causing some shaking, but it quickly reaches the ground and tilts because the rear landing gear didn't deploy. The tail and wings scrape along the ground, but Rayford manages to stop the plane properly. The wing lifts up just in time to avoid Chloe in the truck. The plane skids forward for a few more miles, hitting many things along the way. It looks like it's about to hit a huge fuel tank, but thankfully it stops before the worst happens, and everyone is safe. As the fire Chloe started explodes again, Hattie deploys the inflatable slide so everyone can finally leave the plane. Chloe runs to hug Cameron and Rayford, who admits he should never have left her. She gives him his wedding ring and her mother's ring before everyone gathers together, so he can look at the distant city and they pay attention to all the fires. And Cameron says it's the end of the world, but Chloe thinks it's just the beginning. And that's the end of the movie. We'll meet again in a new summary, and thank you for watching.